Hi, and welcome to the Information Advice and Support Services online training for understanding and reviewing your draft EHCP. My name's Becky Sheldon, and I'm an Information Advice and Support Service Officer. So you should receive a draft plan no later than 14 weeks from the date of the initial request. And at this point, you'll have 15 days to have a read through and respond with any comments or suggested amendments. So it is really important that you understand the plan and what it should look like. The EHCP is divided into sections A to K, and in this training I'm going to go through each of the sections and give you some good examples of the kind of thing that you might expect to be included. I have used a Shropshire EHCP template, but it's important to note that the format might vary slightly, for example if they've updated the paperwork since recording this training, but as long as all the sections A to K are included, that's the main thing. The purpose of an EHCP is to make special educational provision to meet the needs of the child or the young person to secure the best possible outcomes for them across education, health and social care. It's important to understand yours or your child's EHCP so that you're very clear about what is being delivered, why it's being delivered and by who. The SEND Code of Practice said that EHCPs should establish and record the views, interests and aspirations of the child and parents or young person and base decisions on those views. They should describe what the child or young person can do, their special educational needs and any health and social care needs. They should establish outcomes based on the aspirations. They should specify the provision required to achieve the agreed outcomes, and they must take into account evidence from the EHC needs assessment. They must be forward-thinking, so for example, planning for important transition points in a child or young person's life. For example, where the child or young person is in or beyond Year 9, the EHCP plan must also include provision required by your child to help prepare for adulthood and independent living. And importantly, it says that it needs to be clear, concise, understandable and accessible to parents, children, young people, providers and practitioners. The first section of the EHCP is Section A. This is the All About Me and All About My Family paperwork, which usually you would have completed at the very beginning of the process. And it should detail your child's interests and their aspirations. It's quite unlikely that things would have changed in this short period of time, but if it has, obviously this is your opportunity to make any additions or any changes to that paperwork if needed. And remember that when the plan gets reviewed every year, you will have that opportunity to update that paperwork at that point as well. So Section B should specify all of the child or young person's identified special educational needs. In this section, just have a read through and consider whether all the information is relevant. Does it all need to be included? Are you happy with it being included? As most of the information is taken from professional reports, it can sometimes include some background history, which you don't necessarily feel is too relevant. So for example, parents are divorced, the child was bullied at the age of 7 and now they're 14. Talk to your child, involve them in going through the plan as much as possible. Do they want that information included? So bear in mind, plans should not be long, they shouldn't be repetitive, and the information needs to be really relevant. So when describing the needs, it shouldn't simply state a diagnosis. It needs to describe the implications of this diagnosis that it can have on the child's life. A good example is Jack has autism. Jack plays well on his own, however he finds it extremely difficult to engage with other children or to make friends with peers. Section C is describing the child's health needs that are related to their special educational needs. So the same applies in this section, that it should not simply list a child's diagnosis, it should also describe the implications. So a good example here is Grace has cerebral palsy, which affects the right side of her body and as a result has an unsteady gait. Grace prefers to walk unaided for short distances, but over longer distances she needs to use her walking frame. As you can see, any other health needs which are not related to the child's SEN can be included in this section as well. So moving on to section D, as part of the EHC needs assessment, the local authority are required to seek information from social care. Are they involved? Do they need to be involved? Remember, early help also fall under the social care bracket, so any information from them needs to be included, any provision they're providing. So section D is the social care needs that relate to the child or young person's SEN. This information can come from teachers, it can come from youth workers, or of course a social worker. So a good example here is Ezra has extremely limited mobility as described in the health needs. This means that she faces significant challenges in joining in with social activities of her choosing, including family outings and holidays. And again, any other social care needs which are not linked to the child's SEN can be included in this section as well. So section E is the outcomes sought for the child or young person. These outcomes should be SMART, so S-M-A-R-T, SMART, which means they should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-bound. They should cover education, health and social care where appropriate, and they should also reflect aspirations and key changes that are coming up. So for example, moving schools or preparing for adulthood, which is year 9 onwards. So there are a couple of good examples here, and again the format might vary slightly in your EHCP, but the one for a 19-year-old, one example is Ralph will attend 3 work-based interviews by the end of his current course, and this will be delivered through education and social care. The second example is for a 3-year-old. So Joey engages in a play activity with another child and an adult on a daily basis by the time he is in reception, and this will be delivered by education. So you'll see there's some steps to achieve this. So really what that will do is break down that outcome into smaller achievable goals or steps to support the child or young person to get to their long-term outcome. The special educational provision required to meet all of the needs that have already been identified should be listed in section F. And this should be detailed, specific, and where possible, it should be quantified in terms of the type, hours, and frequency of support, and also the level of expertise of the person delivering the support. So, where health and social care provision educates or trained, that must also be included in section F. A useful test regarding this is if the provision was not delivered, would the child still be able to receive the education on par with those without SEND? So in section F, you shouldn't see ambiguous words such as opportunities to, regular, access to, programmes of, are just a few examples. So some bad examples really are interventions to focus on literacy and numeracy. You know, what are those interventions? How often are they having them? Who's delivering them? Regular opportunities to learn how to be independent in the community. What's regular? How often are these opportunities going to happen? What are the opportunities? And who's supporting this child or young person to do this? Discuss friendship issues with an adult. Again, how often are they going to have the chance to discuss these friendship issues? Is it going to be a set time? Is this person going to be available all the time, or are they only available once a week? Access to a mentor to discuss emotions. Again, access to a mentor. How often? When? Is this all the time? Discuss emotions. You know, how are they going to discuss emotions? Is there going to be a specific intervention or provision? So really a lot more specificity and detail needs to happen. A couple of good examples for section F are the first one, Fadia will have a laptop with voice activated software to help her prepare for her GCSEs. The laptop will be for use in all lessons where teachers have identified this will help her to record her work more efficiently. The Senko will provide one-to-one support for 1 hour a week to enable Fadia to use the software. So it's been specified that this will happen 1 hour a week and by the Senko. The second example is Daniel will receive a 30-minute session twice a week focusing on developing his social use of language. The sessions will be delivered by a teaching assistant with one other child. The session programme will be developed under the direction of a speech and language therapist who will train the TA in delivering the sessions. So again, it's been specified that it will happen twice a week for 30 minutes and it will be delivered by a teaching assistant who has received training by a speech and language therapist. So section G is any health provision which is reasonably required by the learning difficulties or disabilities which result in the child or young person having SEN. So refer back to section C and have a look at what were the health needs identified. So again, the provision identified should be detailed, specific and quantified. It could include specialist support and therapies such as medical treatments, delivery of medication, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, nursing support, specialist equipment, wheelchairs and continence supplies. So a couple of good examples are Jake will attend appointments at the hospital every 8 weeks where his condition will be monitored by his consultant. Within the first week of term, a school nurse will deliver a 2-hour training session on managing his seizures for all school staff who work with Jake. And the second example there is Aisha will work with the CAMS team to help her manage her emotional health. She will have 2 blocks of CBT with a clinical psychologist. The blocks will be 6 weeks each, separated by a 2-week review period. So section H is split into 2, H1 and H2. H1 is any social care provision which must be made for a child or young person under 18 resulting from section 2 of the Chronically Sick and Disabled Persons Act 1970. So examples could include practical assistance in the home, provision or assistance in obtaining recreational and educational facilities in and out of the home, assistance in travelling facilities, adaptations to the home, facilitating the taking of holidays, provision of meals at home or elsewhere, and non-residential short breaks. And section H2 is any other social care provision reasonably required by the learning difficulties or disabilities which result in the child or young person having SEN. So this might include provision through early help, children in need assessments, residential short breaks, and adult social care for over 18. So a couple of examples for section H. So H1, it could be something like Elena will receive 2 hours per day help at home from a personal assistant to support feeding and dressing. This time will be split across the morning and afternoon and will be available 7 days a week. And for H2, an example is Tina will have a block of 7 consecutive nights at the local residential short breaks provider to allow her parents to have a holiday. These short breaks will be available twice in this calendar year and should be taken approximately 6 months apart. So section I should name the educational placement that the child is going to go to. If that's not possible, then the type of placement needs to be named, so specialist or mainstream. And it must only be included in the final EHCP. So you won't see this in the draft plan. This will be left blank. If a school or other institution is named in this section, then it must admit the child. Section J should set out the arrangements made for a personal budget required for education, health or social care. This is not the usual arrangement for allocating funds, and most people will feel that a personal budget is not appropriate for them. Normally the local authority will provide the necessary funding to school or college to deliver the support in the plan. But a personal budget is when the amount of money required to deliver provision is identified and the parent or young person is involved in securing that provision. So a personal budget can be requested when the EHCP is at draft stage or at an annual review. The type and the amount of provision should be specified, and the amount of time per week, qualifications and experience of the professional delivering it should also be included. You can find more information on personal budgets in Chapter 9 of the Special Educational Needs Code of Practice. And finally, the last section is section K, and this is a list of all the information and advice that was gathered as part of the EHC needs assessment and that contributed towards the plan. So you should see all the reports, all the information from school, from the EP, from social care, from health. They should all be listed. So that concludes our training. Thank you very much for attending, and I hope you found it helpful. If you have any more questions, please email us at iass@cabshropshire.org.uk. Thank you.